She showed up at his door at 2 a.m., shivering, beautiful, and with nothing but a whisper. "You feel familiar." He was a single dad just trying to get through the night. She, a stranger who would change everything, but not in the way you'd expect. Before we dive into this emotional and unforgettable story of kindness, healing, and second chances. If you enjoy stories that warm your heart and make you believe in the goodness of people, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more meaningful tales like this one. Now let's begin. Single dad answered a knock at 2 a.m. She was shivering gorgeous and said, "You feel familiar." The wine glasses clinked like fragile nerves as a string quartet played in perfect soulless harmony. From the outside, it was a perfect evening, white candles flickering in tall crystal vases, a $1,000 cake poised to be cut, guests glittering with borrowed charm. But Isabelle LaRue was drowning in silk and silence. She stood beside her fiancé, Andrew Harrington III, whose smile was carved from polished ambition. His hand rested on the small of her back, too firm, too practiced. She smiled politely at the crowd gathered in the rooftop ballroom of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel, but her fingers trembled against the flute of champagne. Then her phone buzzed. A single message. From a junior legal associate she once mentored someone brave or foolish enough to tell her the truth. Prenup redline updated. Hidden clause, all holdings to transfer to Harrington Ventures upon marriage dissolution. He's covering his tracks fast. Thought you should know. For one perfect breaking second, the room stilled. Isabelle blinked. Once. Twice. The chandeliers above blurred the room, stretched and curved around her. Andrew leaned in, still smiling for the crowd. Ready to be Mrs. Harrington. Her mouth was dry. She placed the glass down slowly. "Excuse me," she whispered, already turning. "Where are you going?" he asked under his breath, fingers tightening on her wrist. She pulled away. "I need air." She didn't wait, didn't think. Her heels clicked across marble past shocked guests, past murmurs and confused glances through gilded doors and out into the icy Manhattan night. Outside, the city was muffled under snow, the kind of snow that swallowed sound and logic. Her breath came fast. Her skin stung in the open air. Bare shoulders, thin dress, no coat, no phone. She walked blindly past the black SUVs waiting by the curb, past the valet shouting her name. The sequins on her dress caught the light of passing taxis like fallen stars, but no one stopped. No one recognized the woman who'd once graced the cover of Forbes Women to Watch under 35. Tonight, she was just a runaway bride with frozen fingers and something broken behind her ribs. She walked for blocks, heels snapping against icy sidewalks until one cracked beneath her. She fell hard, scraping her palm and tearing the side of her gown. She sat on the pavement, blinking at the snow, her breath catching in her chest. And then she laughed. It came out like a choke, half sob, half surrender. The snow was coming down harder now, clinging to her lashes, her lips, her disbelief. There was nowhere to go. Her feet led her away from the city's glossy facade down quieter streets, older blocks. Eventually, she wandered into a neighborhood where porch lights burned a little warmer, where homes still had paint that chipped and fences that leaned. She stopped in front of a small single-story house with a flickering porch light and a child's drawing taped crookedly in the front window. There was no reason for her to choose it, except that it didn't feel cold. She climbed the short steps and knocked once, twice, 3 times. Then she sagged against the doorframe, her body shivering violently now, lips, numb arms wrapped around herself. Her skin throbbed from the fall, but that wasn't what hurt. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway, late 30s, rough around the edges in a hoodie and worn jeans. His hair was messy, his jaw stubbled, and he blinked at her like he hadn't yet decided if she was real, or a ghost made of snow and regret. She tried to smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." He looked past her down the street, then back. "Are you hurt? She nodded toward her scraped arm. "Not really. Just lost." I'm not here to cause trouble. I just—" Her voice cracked. "You feel familiar. I don't know why." His eyes narrowed. He stepped outside, instinctively wrapping an arm around her shoulders to guide her in. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her like a quilt. There was a small couch, a cluttered coffee table with crayon drawings and juice boxes. A slow lullaby hummed from a baby monitor on the counter. He gently sat her on the couch and grabbed a blanket from the armrest. "I'll get you some tea. Don't go passing out, okay?" She managed a faint nod. The man disappeared into the kitchen and she let her eyes wander the room. There were family photos, just the man and a little girl with curly hair and wide eyes. No sign of a woman. No glamour. No lies. He returned with tea and a first aid kit. "I'm Daniel," he said, kneeling to clean her scrape. "You got a name?" She hesitated. "Belle." A pause. He didn't push. "You're lucky it was my house," he said. "Anyone else might have called the cops. I wouldn't blame them." He looked up. His eyes were kind but guarded. People don't just knock on a stranger's door at 2 a.m., wearing a $5,000 dress, unless something really bad happened. She sipped the tea. It scalded, but she needed it. Something did. He sat across from her. "Well, you're safe now. But just so you know, I've got a 6-year-old asleep in the next room. If you're dangerous, I'll throw you back into the snow." A smile tugged at her lips. The first real one in months. "I'm not dangerous, just tired of pretending." Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We all are, eventually." The wind howled outside. Inside, silence settled like trust, tentative, fragile, and just beginning. Tomorrow would bring questions. But tonight, all that mattered was that someone had opened the door. And for the first time in her life, Isabelle LaRue felt like she hadn't walked into a house, she'd found a home. Isabelle woke to the scent of coffee and the creak of an old house coming alive. The blanket around her shoulders was thick and soft, worn from use. Sunlight filtered through the living room blinds in narrow golden lines, and somewhere in the kitchen a pan sizzled. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it hit her hard and quiet, the wedding, the message, the snow, the knock. Her fingers instinctively reached for the edge of the couch, grounding her in the unfamiliar room that had somehow become her sanctuary for the night. Footsteps. She sat up quickly, smoothing her tangled hair. Daniel appeared in the doorway holding a spatula and looking half amused, half wary. "You're awake," he said, voice low and slightly gravelly, like someone who didn't talk much in the mornings. "Didn't think you'd still be here." She opened her mouth, then paused. "I almost wasn't. But I didn't want to leave without saying thank you." He nodded once and disappeared back into the kitchen. She followed the smell of coffee like it was a lifeline. The kitchen was modest but warm. Wooden cabinets, mismatched mugs, a fridge covered in finger-painted art. A little girl with curly hair sat at the table swinging her legs and drawing with a purple crayon. She looked up and blinked at Isabelle with open curiosity. "This is Lily," Daniel said. "She's 6. Lily, this is Miss Belle. She stayed over last night." Isabelle crouched down. "Hi, Lily. That's a beautiful drawing. Is that a unicorn?" "It's me." "I'm riding a flying lion," Lily said proudly. Isabelle laughed a sound that surprised even her. "Of course you are." Lily studied her. "You're really pretty. Are you a fairy?" Daniel coughed from the stove. "She's just a guest, honey." Lily shrugged and went back to her drawing. Isabelle stood brushing hair behind her ear, embarrassed and touched all at once. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Daniel asked, sliding a plate of eggs and toast onto the table. "I'm off today. I can take you to a bus stop. Or the police, if that's what you need." She hesitated. "No police, and no bus stop. Not yet." He studied her in silence, and for a moment Isabelle could feel the calculation behind his gaze. He wasn't stupid. He knew something wasn't right. But he wasn't pressing her. Not yet. She took a seat. Just a couple more hours if that's okay. I'll be out of your hair by lunch. Daniel poured her a cup of coffee and nodded. All right, but I like to know who's in my house, Belle, especially around Lily. His voice wasn't sharp, but there was steel underneath. She looked down into her coffee. I understand. The morning passed quietly. Isabel offered to wash dishes, and Daniel let her. There was something grounding about scrubbing plates and stacking mugs so different from the world she had run from. No catered meals, no assistants, just soap water and the occasional hum from the little girl playing in the living room. Daniel stepped out back to check on the heater unit, and Isabel took a moment to wander. The house was small but alive. Family photos on the walls, Daniel younger with a woman beside him, smiling. Then newer photos, Daniel with just Lily. There was a soft knock on the doorframe behind her. She turned to see Lily standing there holding a book. Will you read to me? The girl asked. Isabel blinked. You want me to? Lily nodded. Dad reads the same story every time. He does the voices, but he skips pages when he's tired. Isabel knelt down and opened the book. Well, I promise not to skip a single page. They sat on the couch together, and Lily nestled in beside her like they had known each other for months, not hours. Halfway through the story, Daniel returned, pausing in the doorway. He didn't interrupt, just watched. And something softened in his face. Not affection, not yet. But the beginnings of something gentler than suspicion. When the story ended, Lily jumped off the couch. I'm going to draw you next, she declared. With wings. Isabel laughed again, and Daniel stepped into the room. She doesn't usually warm up to people that fast. She's incredible, Isabel said. You're a good dad. Daniel looked away. I'm just doing my best. There was a long pause, comfortable but weighted. Then he said, You're not homeless. That dress cost more than this house. Isabel swallowed. She could lie again. She could say she was running from a bad relationship or family issues. But something in his voice, honest, tired, unvarnished, made it feel wrong. No, she admitted quietly. I'm not homeless. He waited. I walked out of something last night, something I probably should have never walked into in the first place. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Wedding. She nodded. Yours a beat. Then, yes. He gave a low whistle. Damn. She smiled ruefully. Yeah. Daniel studied her. You running from someone who's going to come after you? No. Just from a life that doesn't feel like mine. He didn't push further. Just nodded. I can respect that. Outside, the snow began to melt. Inside, the air between them shifted just slightly, like two people standing on opposite sides of a broken bridge quietly beginning to rebuild it. Daniel turned toward the kitchen. You want grilled cheese before you go? I make a killer one. Isabel looked down at Lily's drawing herself with wings and a golden crown. She smiled. Only if you don't skip pages when you tell me how to make it. Daniel chuckled. Deal. And just like that, the clock kept ticking, but no one moved toward goodbye. The days that followed didn't feel like real days to Isabel. They weren't marked by board meetings or press releases or carefully arranged dinners in high-rise restaurants with impossible views. Here, time passed by the rhythm of small, ordinary things, a morning cartoon theme song, the rustle of Lily's school backpack, and the scent of grilled cheese, always slightly burnt. She hadn't planned to stay past that first morning. But snowstorms had other plans, and Daniel, though quiet and still watching her with cautious eyes, didn't push her out. He didn't ask again about the wedding or her real name. He didn't press her for any truth she wasn't ready to offer. That kind of silence. It was a rare kindness. On the third morning, she rose early just before dawn. The house was dark and still except for the hum of the refrigerator and the slow, even breathing of the man asleep on the recliner, a book face down on his chest. His daughter had fallen asleep in his lap, a crayon still tucked between her fingers. Isabel paused there for a moment, watching them, this quiet pocket of warmth she'd never known she needed. She tiptoed into the kitchen and began making coffee. She didn't know why she was still here. Well, she did. It wasn't the snow. It was how Lily had reached for her hand during a movie the night before without asking anything in return. It was how Daniel, in his quietly worn-out way, had told her she could stay as long as it felt right. Not until you get your life together. Not until you explain yourself. Just as long as it feels right. And somehow it did. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned from a quick job repairing a busted furnace. Lily was at school. Isabel had tidied the living room, reheated leftover soup, and for reasons she couldn't explain, dug into Daniel's scattered papers on the table. "Didn't mean to pry," she said when he walked in, brushing her hands on her jeans. "But your scholarship application for Lily has a few mistakes. Formatting issues mostly. I fixed them if that's okay." Daniel blinked at her, taking the packet. "You read this, I proofread it," she said. "And you should lead with the part about working nights and still volunteering at the shelter. That's the story." He studied her carefully. "You're good at this. I used to read proposals like these every week," she said, and then caught herself. He didn't press. He just said thanks and put the papers gently back in the folder. But something about the moment shifted. His gaze held hers a second longer. There was a question in it, but also a kind of invitation, one that said, "I see you're trying. I won't ask why yet, but I see it." That night, snow fell again, though gentler than before. Isabel stepped out onto the small porch after Lily had gone to bed, wrapped in one of Daniel's flannel jackets. She heard the door creak behind her and felt Daniel join her silently. "You always leave the porch light on?" she asked, not looking at him. "For Lily, mostly," he said. "She says it makes the dark less scary." Isabel nodded. "I used to sleep with a flashlight under my pillow." Daniel glanced at her. "And now," she hesitated. "Now I sleep in silence, but it doesn't feel like rest." A beat of quiet passed. Then he asked, what was he like? She turned to him. His expression wasn't accusatory. "Just curious, careful. My fiancé," she said. He nodded. Smart, polished, strategic. He knew exactly what to say to impress a room, but when no one was watching... She swallowed. "He didn't look at me like I was a person, just a role to play." Daniel looked away, jaw tightening. "I know that kind of man. I stayed longer than I should have," she admitted, "because I thought maybe love was supposed to feel that way. Maybe I didn't deserve more." And now he asked softly. She looked up at him, the porch light catching in her eyes. "Now I'm sitting on a porch with a man who fixes heaters and makes grilled cheese like it's an art form. And for the first time in years, I feel human again." Daniel turned to her, a softness blooming in the corners of his expression. "You're more than human, Belle. You're honest." She laughed dryly. "Only now." "Now counts," he said. "Sometimes now is all we've got." The next morning, Lily begged Isabel to braid her hair for school. Daniel watched from the hallway, arms crossed, silently amused. "You're good with her," he said as Isabel twisted the girl's curls. "She's easy to love," Isabel replied. "You say that like it's not something you've done before." "I haven't," she said quietly. "Not like this." Lily turned and gave her a sloppy hug, her small arms warm around Isabel's waist. That was the moment Isabel knew she wasn't just hiding here anymore. She was healing. That evening, Daniel sat with Isabel on the living room floor, while Lily colored nearby. "Why'd you really run?" he asked quietly without preamble. She didn't answer right away. Then, "Because I realized I wasn't just walking into a marriage. I was handing over my name, my choices, and everything I'd built. And he didn't love me. He loved the leverage." Daniel leaned back thoughtful. "Takes guts to walk away." It didn't feel brave, she admitted. It felt like drowning. He looked at her, then really looked and said, "You made it out. That's what matters." She didn't say anything. She just looked back. And for the first time since the knock at 2 a.m., she thought maybe this wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning. Saturday morning broke with the sound of a dripping faucet and the faint hum of cartoons echoing down the hallway. Isabel stood barefoot in the kitchen, twisting open a stubborn jar of strawberry jam while toast popped from the toaster behind her. Her hair was damp from a shower, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. She didn't look like a woman who once held meetings with Wall Street bankers. She looked normal. And for the first time she liked that reflection. Lily sat at the small table, coloring tongue sticking out in concentration. "Can you help me spell believe?" she asked without looking up. Isabel smiled, walked over, and spelled it letter by letter as the little girl wrote. "You're smart," Lily declared, "like Miss Megan at school, but prettier." Daniel, who had just walked in, raised an eyebrow. "Careful, kid. You're inflating her ego." Isabel laughed, handing him a coffee mug. "Don't worry, it's been deflated plenty." He took the mug and sipped. "You sleep okay, I did. For once." Their eyes met. Something lingered there, muted affection, maybe even a question neither of them dared voice. Isabel looked away first. Daniel nodded toward the table. "You're good with her. She makes it easy. She doesn't usually trust people fast." "Neither do I," Isabel said. "But she's got that light. You know." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know." That afternoon, while Lily napped, Daniel asked if Isabel wanted to walk with him to the neighborhood center where he volunteered sometimes. It was a small brick building with peeling paint, but a warm heart. On weekends it hosted food drives and coat collections. Isabel slipped on Lily's spare beanie. It was purple and too small, and followed him. Inside, volunteers were stacking donated blankets. A woman with silver hair and bright eyes greeted Daniel with a hug. "Didn't think I'd see you today, Han," she said. "Needed to drop off some boxes." Daniel replied, then turned. "This is Belle. She's staying with us for a little while." The woman smiled. "Any friend of Daniel's is a friend of mine. I'm Marjorie." Isabel shook her hand. It was warm and firm. Marjorie leaned in and whispered, "You're the first woman he's brought here in 5 years." Isabel blinked. "Oh no, it's not like that. I'm just what Marjorie asked gently. I'm not sure yet." Marjorie nodded knowingly. That's often where the best stories start. On the walk home, Daniel asked, "You okay? I like her," Isabel said. "She likes you too. That's rare. Marjorie's got a sixth sense for people who are full of it." "I used to be full of it," Isabel said with a half smile. He looked at her. "But you're not now." They passed a bus stop and Isabel slowed. Her hand grazed the cold metal bench. For a moment she looked like she might sit down, like she might go. Daniel stopped a few steps ahead. "You thinking of leaving?" She hesitated. "I'm thinking of what happens when I do." He nodded. "Want the truth?" "Always. I'll miss having someone in the kitchen who doesn't burn toast." She laughed, breath fogging in the cold. "But more than that," he said, quieter now. "Lily, she's opening up in ways I haven't seen in a long time, and that's because of you." Isabel blinked hard. "I don't want to hurt her." "Then don't. Simple. No pressure. Just honesty. The kind of truth you couldn't buy in Manhattan." That evening, Daniel pulled out an old photo album. They sat on the floor while Lily curled against Isabel's side, half asleep. "She looks like her mom," Isabel said softly, pointing to a photo of a young woman with a wide smile and tired eyes. "Yeah," Daniel replied, voice low. April passed when Lily was just a baby. Complications from an undiagnosed heart condition. "I'm sorry." "So was I." He flipped the page. "I was building my career then. Had offers lined up, promotions coming. But after April, I couldn't leave Lily with strangers. So I took local jobs, maintenance, plumbing, some HVAC gigs. Never went back to the office world." Isabel looked at him. "You gave all that up for her. I didn't see it that way," he said. "I just saw a baby who didn't have a mom. and I thought she's not going to lose both parents to ambition." Isabel swallowed. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." They sat in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Outside, the snow fell again, silent and slow, as if the world were cushioning them just for tonight. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Isabel lingered in the kitchen, staring at the small light on the stove. Daniel walked in, drying his hands. "I should tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned against the doorway. "Okay, I wasn't just running from a wedding. I was running from a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. One that smiled in photos and made decisions for shareholders and stood beside a man who didn't even ask how I liked my coffee." Daniel crossed the room slowly. "And how do you like your coffee?" She looked up, eyes glassy, with a little cream and something true to believe in. Daniel reached past her and poured 2 cups. Then, "Let's start there." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. The heat of the mug seeped into her palms, but it wasn't the only warmth that settled in her chest. And in that kitchen, with nothing more than mismatched mugs and flickering lights, Isabel felt something solid for the first time in years. Not a promise, but maybe the beginning of one. The sun filtered through gauzy curtains, painting long golden streaks across the floorboards. Isabel stood at the window with a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching Lily run circles around a pile of snow in the front yard. Her laughter rang out like wind chimes, bright and unpredictable, filling the cold morning air with something alive. Inside, the house felt heavier. Not in a bad way, just in a way that suggested something was changing. Isabel didn't know exactly when the guilt started creeping in, perhaps somewhere between Lily handing her a crayon-scribbled drawing of the 3 of them holding hands and Daniel pouring her a second cup of coffee with the familiarity of someone who'd known her longer than a week. She felt like a trespasser in a life that wasn't hers, yet everything in it made her want to stay. Daniel walked in from the hallway, towel over one shoulder, hair damp from the shower. "I'm heading into town this afternoon," he said casually. "Just a short job replacing a water heater." She nodded. "You'll be okay with Lily for a bit." "Of course," Isabel said. "She and I have big plans, blanket fort story hour, maybe a tea party if you're lucky." He chuckled. "Just don't let her paint your nails. You'll never get that glitter off." Their eyes locked for a beat longer than necessary. Then he said softly, "I trust you." It landed heavier than she expected. 3 simple words, but they carried weight. She smiled, but it was tight. "Thanks," she said, turning back toward the window to hide her unease. That afternoon, while Lily napped in a cocoon of stuffed animals, Isabel wandered into the living room. She wasn't snooping, not really, but a folder on the dining table had caught her eye, the one she'd helped him reorganize. It was still open, Daniel's rough handwriting scattered in the margins. She flipped through it slowly. Neat revisions. A cover letter she hadn't seen before, addressed to the district school board. Her heart warmed at the thought of Lily thriving in a school that saw her potential. And Daniel, this man who had once designed systems for high-rise buildings, now writing essays about playground safety and after-school programs. He had quietly repurposed his brilliance into something real, something for someone else. Her fingers paused over a page that still bore her own faint notes in red ink. She should feel proud. Instead, she felt like she was slipping, becoming attached, becoming someone who belonged here. And that was dangerous, because she didn't. Because, later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep watching Finding Nemo, Isabel found herself curled on the couch next to Daniel. The movie menu hummed quietly on the screen, casting soft blue light across the room. Neither of them moved to turn it off. Daniel leaned back, one hand cradling a mug, the other resting casually along the back of the couch. "You don't talk much about where you came from," he said gently. Isabel didn't answer right away. She stared down at her knees, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket in her lap. "I used to think I had everything," she said. "A corner office, a closet full of designer clothes, invitations to every gala and fundraiser. But none of it meant anything if I had to keep pretending I was someone else to earn it." Daniel nodded, not interrupting. I worked for years to climb out of the shadow of my father's name, she went on. And then I met Andrew, polished, charming, connected. He made me feel like I'd finally arrived, until I realized he didn't love me. He loved the idea of what marrying me would get him. Daniel's jaw tightened. So I ran, she finished. Not because I was brave, because if I didn't, I would have lost myself completely. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. You ever think about going back, he asked. To that life, she said. No, not even for a second. But I do think about how I'm going to face the world when it eventually finds me again. He shifted, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You want my advice? She looked at him surprised. He smiled faintly. Probably not. But I'll give it anyway. Go on, she said. People will always try to define you by your worst moment or your biggest one. Doesn't mean they're right. You get to decide who you are now, starting from wherever you are, even if that's a couch in a messy house with a kid who draws flying lions. A soft laugh escaped her throat, small but real. You make it sound simple. It's not, he said, but it is worth it. She let that sit between them. It was the kind of thing her past self would have written off as quaint. But here in this house with peeling baseboards and the smell of old books, it felt truer than anything marble floors or panoramic views had ever given her. Later, when she walked past Lily's room to check on her, she found a drawing taped to the inside of the door. It was stick figures again, 3 of them. Lily in the middle, grinning, Daniel on one side, and Isabel on the other, wearing a crown and holding a steaming cup of coffee. Above their heads in crayon letters were 3 words, My Happy Home. Isabel stared at it for a long time. She wanted to belong to that picture more than she could admit. But in the distance in the city she'd escaped, her face was still on newspapers. Gossip blogs. Corporate whispers. She hadn't just run away from a man, she'd run away from an empire, and eventually someone would come looking. She reached up, gently touched the corner of the drawing with her fingertips, then turned off the hallway light. In her chest, hope and dread wrestled in silence. And for the first time, Isabel didn't know which one would win. The storm came in the middle of the night, not one of snow or wind, but of memory. Isabel sat upright in the guest room, drenched in cold sweat. Her breath came short fast. The nightmare still clung to her skin, flashes of camera lights, Andrew's face at the altar turning stone cold her name. Isabel LaRue, echoing across news broadcasts, dissected, sold, spun. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady the pounding rhythm beneath her ribs. The house was quiet, but her thoughts weren't. They spun, spiraled. She couldn't sleep, not now. Instead, she wrapped herself in a blanket and crept into the living room. She didn't expect to find Daniel already there, sitting on the edge of the couch, a mug of coffee in one hand, eyes dark with thought. He didn't flinch when he saw her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. She shook her head and sat beside him. He handed her his mug without a word. She accepted it. For a few moments they just listened to the house settle. Pipes groaned, wind brushed against the windows, and somewhere in the walls the heater hummed to life. Finally, Isabel said, "Do you ever feel like the moment you start to feel safe, something's going to take it away?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "Then I used to." "What changed?" He looked at her. "I stopped waiting to lose things. Started trying to build them." She stared down at the mug. What if you build something and someone from the past shows up to knock it down? Daniel exhaled slowly, like he already knew what she wasn't saying. "Isabel," he said quietly. The first time he'd used her full name. "You know the world doesn't just forget someone like you. Not forever." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The next morning was a Sunday. Crisp and silent. Lily danced around the kitchen in mismatched socks, begging for blueberry pancakes. Isabel tried to keep her hands from shaking as she poured batter into the pan. She had made up her mind last night. She would tell Daniel the truth, everything. She owed him that. She owed Lily that. But fate has a cruel sense of timing, because the knock came before the confession. 3 sharp raps at the front door. Not panicked, not desperate, just firm. Daniel, drying a dish, glanced toward the sound, expecting anyone he asked. She froze, spatula mid-air. Her stomach dropped. He narrowed his eyes. Bell. She didn't move. Another knock. Stronger. Daniel went to the door and pulled it open halfway, his body blocking the threshold. A man in a charcoal suit stood there, tall and calm, with frost still clinging to his shoulders. "Good morning," the man said smoothly. "I'm looking for Isabel LaRue." Daniel's spine straightened. "Who's asking Jonathan Lake?" the man replied, slipping out a sleek leather wallet and flashing a private security badge. "I work for Harrington Global. Miss LaRue's safety is of paramount concern to us." Daniel said nothing. His jaw was locked. Isabel stepped into view. Jonathan gave her a small nod. "There you are. We've been looking for you. Are you all right?" Her mouth was dry. "I'm fine. Your disappearance caused considerable alarm. The media is ravenous." "I didn't disappear," she said, voice steady. "I walked away." Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Andrew's been very concerned. He's prepared to offer a private settlement. He simply wants a final statement clearing his name, and then you'll be free to move on however you like." Isabel blinked. So this was it. Not a rescue. A cleanup. A transaction. Daniel glanced between them. "This man bothering you?" "No," she said quietly. "But he's not here for me. He's here for the version of me they can package and silence." Jonathan's smile faltered. "I'm not going back," she said louder now. "I'm not signing anything. Tell Andrew he can keep his empire. I want my name back." "Very well," Jonathan said after a pause. "We'll proceed accordingly, but I assure you the press will find you soon enough." He turned, descended the steps, and disappeared down the sidewalk like he hadn't just split the air wide open. The door closed. Silence. Daniel stood still. Then he turned to her. "So," he said, voice controlled, "you're Isabel LaRue." She nodded. "You're the woman who walked away from a $100 million empire and let the world think you'd been kidnapped." "Yes. You stayed here," he continued, voice low, "in my home, with my daughter, and you never told me who you were." "I wanted to," she said, eyes stinging. I didn't know how. Every time I tried, it felt like saying it out loud would break something." "You should have let it," he snapped. "Before Lily drew pictures of you with a crown and started calling you family. That one hurt." "I'm still me," she whispered. Daniel stared at her, eyes filled with something deeper than anger, betrayal. "I let you into our lives," he said. "I let Lily believe you were staying. And I—" He broke off, running a hand through his hair. Isabel stepped forward. "Please don't shut me out." He shook his head. "I need space." She flinched. Daniel softened just a fraction. "Not forever. Just until I figure out whether the woman I let in is still standing here." That night, Isabel packed her things. She folded Lily's drawings carefully into her coat pocket. She didn't cry. She couldn't. There was a strange stillness in her chest now, as if the worst had already passed and left her hollow. She didn't leave a note. She just opened the front door, stepped into the falling snow, and closed it gently behind her. The porch light stayed on. But for the first time, it didn't feel like it was meant for her. The motel room was small, tired-looking, and smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. Isabel sat on the edge of the stiff bed, wrapped in a blanket not meant to comfort. The television flickered soundlessly in the corner, a muted infomercial hawking miracle knives. She wasn't watching. Her phone vibrated again. 17 missed calls. 3 from Jonathan Lake. 4 from former colleagues. 1 from her mother. The rest from unknown numbers. She hadn't listened to a single voicemail. The headlines were everywhere. Now runaway CEO finally found in small-town outskirts. Isabel LaRue refuses statement. What is she hiding? Harrington demands answers after public embarrassment. They made her sound like a scandal, not a person, and somehow the only silence she couldn't bear was Daniel's. He hadn't called, not even once. 3 days passed. 3 long, paper-thin days in which Isabel drifted between motel coffee and hollow sleep, each moment heavier than the last. She found herself scrolling through old photos, not of Andrew, not of Gala's, but of Lily's drawings. She'd taken pictures before she left. Drawings of stars and flying lions, and the one that gutted her most, the 3 of them under a bright yellow sun labeled My Happy Home. She told herself she had done the right thing, that Daniel deserved honesty, that she had finally faced the truth about her life. So why did everything feel worse than when she was hiding? On the 4th morning, she visited the local pharmacy for cough syrup. Her throat had tightened from stress or guilt, or both. She wore sunglasses and a hoodie, but a woman near the checkout counter still paused and whispered to her friend, "Isn't that the one who Isabel left without buying anything?" That night she sat by the window and watched the snow fall thinner now, almost gentle. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a missed call. It was a message, from a number she didn't recognize, but her breath caught when she saw the name. Marjorie. "I don't know what happened, sweetheart, but Daniel's quieter than I've seen him in years, and Lily hasn't colored anything in 3 days. If you ever felt like you mattered here, it's because you do. Come home." Isabel stared at the screen. Her chest cracked just a little. Come home. The next morning, she boarded a local bus headed back toward the neighborhood she had tried to forget for their sake. Not her own. She wasn't sure if Daniel would even open the door. She just knew she had to try. She stepped off the bus mid-afternoon. The snow had mostly melted, leaving behind gray slush and puddles. The house looked the same modest quiet, with the crooked drawing still taped inside the front window. Isabel approached slowly, her breath shallow. The porch light was off. That alone almost stopped her. But then she heard laughter from around the side of the house. She followed the sound and found them in the backyard. Daniel was crouched beside Lily, fixing the chain on her small pink bicycle. His hands were greasy. Lily was covered in sidewalk chalk. For a moment, Isabel just watched them. Daniel looked tired. Lily looked like something was missing. Then Lily spotted her. She froze. Belle, her voice cracked. Daniel looked up. Time stilled. Isabel stepped forward, unsure if she was breathing. "Hi, Lily." The little girl ran to her without hesitation and threw her arms around her waist. "You left," she whispered. "You didn't say goodbye?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Isabel said, her voice catching. "I didn't know how." Daniel stood wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't speak. Isabel met his gaze. "Can I talk to you?" He nodded, once curt, and gestured toward the porch. Inside, he poured 2 mugs of tea, just like he always had. She took hers without a word, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't leave to run away," she began. "I left to protect something." "You left without saying a word." Daniel replied, his voice even, but tired. "That's not protection. That's abandonment." She swallowed hard. "You're right. I was scared. Not of the media. Not even of Andrew. I was scared of how much I cared about being here." He looked at her. "You think that excuse is lying?" "No," she said. "But I wasn't lying when I read Lily bedtime stories, or when I cleaned your kitchen, or when I helped with that application. None of that was fake." Daniel sat back, arms crossed. "I didn't expect to find anything real when I knocked on your door," Isabel continued. "But I did. I found a little girl who reminded me what love felt like. I found a man who sees people not their titles. I found home." He didn't respond right away. Finally, he said, "Lily cried when you left. She asked if she'd done something wrong." Isabel flinched. "God, no. She's the only thing that made me feel right." Daniel's voice softened. "So what now? You tell the world who you are and then vanish again when it gets hard?" "No," she said, steady now. "I've made arrangements. I'm stepping down from the company permanently. selling my shares, donating most of the proceeds to a housing initiative. Quietly, legally, permanently. I'm not going back to that world. I've already started dissolving it." He blinked, surprised. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," she said. "I'm just asking you to believe that I'm choosing you on purpose. And if you let me, I'd like to earn my way back." A long silence. Then Daniel sighed and stood. Isabel's heart sank. But instead of walking away, he held out his hand. "I'm not good at second chances," he said, "but I believe in first truths." She took his hand, and this time when their fingers touched it felt like the beginning of something that had been waiting all along. A kind of peace that didn't come from hiding, but from finally being seen. The days that followed didn't feel like repair. They felt like quiet rebuilding. Like stepping into a house after a storm and not picking up the pieces all at once, but gently, room by room, with reverence for what had broken and what was worth saving. Isabel stayed, but not as a guest anymore. She took the laundry down before Daniel could. She packed Lily's school lunches, learned how she liked her carrot sticks arranged, and that peanut butter had to be smooth, not chunky. She brewed Daniel's coffee exactly the way he liked it, with just a dash of cinnamon, though he'd never asked. In return, he cleared a drawer for her things. He didn't say much, but the gesture was louder than any apology. Lily started drawing again. The first picture was a flying house with Belle on the roof and Daniel at the wheel. Lily was in the window arms flung wide in joy. She taped it to the fridge without a word, as if the silence itself sealed something sacred. One evening, as twilight painted the neighborhood in soft purples and amber, Isabel sat on the porch steps while Daniel worked quietly on the front yard heater. Lily was at a sleepover, her laughter no longer echoing from the house. Isabel wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, unsure whether it was to ward off the chill or the quiet. She watched Daniel from the corner of her eye. His sleeves were rolled up forearms flecked with dust, a pencil tucked behind one ear. "How did you learn to do all this?" she asked. He didn't look up. "My dad was a fix-it-all kind of guy. Taught me more with a wrench than I ever learned in college." "Did you always want to be an engineer?" "Not really," he said. "I wanted to be a writer, but I was good at math and writing didn't pay the bills." "You're still a builder," she said softly. He paused, glanced at her. She continued, "You build safe spaces. Not just heaters and stair rails. You built a world Lily could trust. You built a space I could fall into without breaking." Daniel sat back, wiping his hands on a rag. "I wasn't always good at it." "No one is," she said. "But you did it anyway. That counts." He looked at her long and searching. The kind of look that didn't scan appearances but sought truths beneath them. "I'm not scared anymore," she added. "Of what? Of being known. Of not being who people want me to be." He nodded slowly. "That's a hard fear to beat." "I didn't beat it," she said. "You helped me carry it until I could set it down." Daniel stood, tossed the rag over his shoulder, and walked toward her. "I never asked what happened after," he said. "After you left." "What did you do?" "I went back to the firm." "Quietly." "I sat across from a boardroom full of men in cufflinks and said, 'You can have the company, the tower, the legacy. I don't want it.' I signed it all away except a small fund I kept for something better." He raised a brow. "Better. I want to build something like this," she said. "Real places. Affordable housing. Safe spaces for single parents, foster kids, anyone who just needs a door to knock on at 2 a.m. and be let in without question." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You'll do it." "I believe that." "Will you help me?" she asked, voice quiet. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped forward, reached out, and pulled her gently to her feet. And then he did something he hadn't done since she returned. He hugged her, not as a friend, not as a stranger learning to trust again, but as a man who had waited for the truth and found it was exactly what his heart had hoped. Her arms folded around him, and they stood there wrapped in each other beneath the porch light she had once stood beneath, shivering alone. This time she was warm. Inside the house was dim but alive. The heater hummed, the clock ticked softly, and the scent of cinnamon from an earlier baked pie still lingered in the air. Daniel poured them each a cup of tea, and they sat at the kitchen table as the world settled around them. "I never told you," she said, stirring hers, "about the first night I saw you." "You mean when you knocked on my door?" "No," she said. "Earlier. Before the knock. I saw the porch light flicker on through the trees. I was cold, hurting, didn't know where I was. And then I saw it. A warm light, steady, not too bright, not too loud. Just enough to say, 'Come closer if you need something.'" He leaned back. That old porch light. It felt like hope. He chuckled, shaking his head. "It flickers half the time. I've meant to replace it for years, don't," she said. "Not yet. It brought me home." Before bed, Isabel peeked into Lily's room out of habit. Though the girl wasn't home, the scent of her lavender shampoo lingered. On her nightstand was a picture she hadn't seen before a Polaroid Isabel hadn't known was taken. It was of the three of them. She was laughing, head tilted back, Daniel looking at her with an expression so gentle it hurt. Lily was in the middle, eyes lit up. Scrawled beneath it in Lily's handwriting, "This is where magic lives." Isabel touched the photo with her fingertips, then closed the door gently. Downstairs, Daniel was turning off lights. She joined him, brushing her hand against his. He didn't flinch. They walked together through the quiet, turning off one lamp at a time until only the porch light remained. Neither of them turned it off, and outside, in the quiet of a town that never made headlines, hope kept flickering softly, just enough to be seen. It started with a knock. But not like before. This one came in the late afternoon, with sunlight slanting through the windows and the smell of baked apples curling from the oven. Isabel was tying Lily's shoes on the living room floor while Daniel adjusted the thermostat near the hallway. Everything felt ordinary, quiet, whole. The knock broke it not violently but firmly, a reminder that the world didn't disappear just because they'd built a safe corner within it. Daniel answered the door with a practiced calm. Isabel rose slowly, heart already fluttering. It wasn't Jonathan this time. It wasn't Andrew or a reporter. It was a woman in a tailored gray blazer and patent leather heels, flanked by a younger man carrying a digital tablet. "Ms. LaRue," the woman said. "My name is Caroline Niven. I represent a consortium of investors who were very surprised when you stepped away from LaRue Holdings." Isabel blinked. "How did you find me?" Caroline offered a placid smile. "We have resources, and a very expensive reason to care where you've gone." Daniel stepped forward slightly. "She's not interested. Whatever it is she's done." Caroline barely looked at him. "I'm here to offer Ms. LaRue a new opportunity, one that makes sense for her talents, her vision, and her name." The younger man opened his tablet, spinning it toward Isabel. A presentation flickered to life. Renderings of modern housing complexes, digital dashboards showing funding projections, headlines reading LaRue Urban Renewal Project. "Affordable housing," Caroline said, as if she were unveiling a yacht, "powered by sustainable materials, data-driven community development. We want to brand it with you. You could lead from wherever you like." Isabel stared at the tablet, then at Caroline. "You want me to come back," she said, but quieter. "Palatable. Sellable. We want to help you make an impact at scale," Caroline said smoothly. "You already have a cause. Now you have an audience. Let us amplify it." Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Isabel handed the tablet back. "Thank you," she said. "But no." Caroline's mask cracked. "You haven't even heard the financials. That's the part I'm least interested in." The younger man looked stunned. Caroline blinked slowly, recalibrating. "You're walking away from millions." "I've already walked away from billions," Isabel replied, voice steady. "I'm not here to be a symbol or a pitch deck. I'm here to do something that matters." She glanced at Daniel. "And I don't need a boardroom to prove that." Caroline pursed her lips, nodded curtly, and turned to leave. As the door clicked shut, Daniel exhaled. You meant that he asked. She turned to him. Every word. He crossed his arms, thoughtful. So, what now? Isabel smiled. We build something real. From the ground up. The right way. No headlines. No PR firm. Just us. 2 weeks later, they held the first planning meeting at the community center. Marjorie made coffee and insisted on name tags even though everyone already knew one another. Daniel stood by a whiteboard with blueprints. Isabel sat cross-legged on a folding chair beside a veteran school principal, a retired city planner, and 2 single moms juggling toddlers. There were no suits, no assistants, just people who had lived through hard things and wanted to help others survive them. This, Isabel whispered to Daniel between comments, is what the world needs more of. People. People who remember what it's like to need a second chance and want to be the reason someone else gets one. Daniel smiled almost shyly. You've changed. She tilted her head. Maybe. Or maybe I just remembered who I was before I got lost. The first project was modest, restoring a long-abandoned house into transitional housing for women leaving domestic violence shelters. Isabel used a portion of the trust she'd kept not to control, but to launch. The rest came from Grant's volunteers and Daniel's long list of former clients who owed him favors and remembered his quiet reliability. He worked on the roof himself. Isabel painted walls alongside a mother of 3. Lily handed out lemonade from the front steps wearing a plastic hard hat. They called it the North Light Project after the porch light that had first welcomed Isabel in from the snow. One evening, after days of drywall and dust, Daniel found Isabel alone in the nearly finished house. She stood in what would be the kitchen, her hands on the edge of the counter, staring at the space as if she could already hear laughter filling it. He stepped behind her arms, folded, thinking of moving in. She smiled, just imagining what it'll feel like when someone walks through that door scared out of their mind, and realizes they're safe now. He leaned on the opposite counter. You gave up a lot to do this. I didn't give anything up, she said. I traded up. He chuckled. You know, when I first opened my door that night, I thought you were going to collapse. I almost did, she said. But you didn't let me. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out something folded. It was one of Lily's drawings, creased and a little faded. Found this behind the bookshelf when we moved it, he said. Thought maybe you'd want it. She opened it carefully. It was the original, the 3 of them beneath the yellow sun labeled My Happy Home. She stared at it for a long moment. Then gently she tucked it into her jacket pocket. You know, she said, voice softer now. For all the millions I was offered, this is still the most valuable thing I've ever been handed. Daniel stepped forward, brushing his hand along hers. That's because it can't be bought. Their fingers laced slowly, effortlessly. And as the sun dipped outside the newly painted window, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the first place in a long time where something sacred had taken root. Not an empire, not a brand, but a life. One built not on power or legacy, but on love, and the unshakable worth of being truly seen. The house glowed softly beneath the early evening sky. Fresh coats of white paint shone clean and welcoming, and flower beds newly planted hugged the foundation like gentle hands. In the backyard, Lily ran in clumsy zigzags, chasing after a kite Daniel had helped her build its tail, fluttering like ribbons of freedom. Isabel stood on the porch, brushing dust from her jeans, a clipboard in one hand. Her hair was tied back, cheeks flushed with the effort of real work and real purpose. But her eyes, their light came from somewhere deeper, somewhere settled. Tomorrow was opening day. The first family would arrive, a young mother with a toddler and nowhere else to go. Isabel had memorized their names. She'd placed a book on the nightstand, folded fresh sheets, lit a small candle in the entryway that smelled like citrus and hope. Marjorie had insisted on hanging a sign over the door. The North Light Project. A home, not a handout. Isabel had cried when she saw it. That night, as they packed away the final tools, Daniel found her standing barefoot in the middle of the main room. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I was just thinking about the first night I stepped into your house. How I felt so small, so lost." He didn't speak, just listened. And now she continued. "I feel like I've built something that helps others not feel that way. Maybe that's how we know we've healed, when our scars become someone else's shelter." Daniel stepped beside her. "You didn't just build a shelter, Belle. You built a way out. That matters. I couldn't have done it without you." He turned to her, his voice lower. "You didn't need me to do it. But I'm glad you let me walk beside you while you did." She looked at him. Really looked. The man who had opened his door to a stranger in a torn designer dress, whose daughter had colored her way into Isabel's heart, whose quiet steadiness had become the only thing that made her believe again. Her voice came softer now. "I wasn't planning to fall in love with you." Daniel held her gaze. "I wasn't planning to be someone you could fall in love with." A beat passed. Then Isabel reached for his hand and said, "Let's stop planning." The next morning was crisp, full of promise. Volunteers bustled about, setting up refreshments in the yard. The town's mayor showed up with a ribbon and oversized scissors. The local news came small cameras and big hearts. Daniel gave a quiet interview. Isabel declined the spotlight, letting the project speak for itself. But the true moment, the one no camera caught, happened hours later, when all the guests had gone and the sun had begun to lower itself gently across the rooftops. A small blue sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman stepped out clutching a diaper bag. She looked young, tired, and unsure. Her child, no more than 2, clung to her leg. Isabel walked out alone, leaving the others inside. "Hi," she said softly. "You must be Jordan." The woman nodded, eyes darting with uncertainty. Isabel smiled gently. "This is your space now. Come see it." She guided her through the front door, pointing to the basket of toiletries, the stocked mini-fridge, the crib tucked neatly in the corner. Jordan didn't say much, but when she sank into the edge of the bed and her child curled beside her, the relief that washed over her face said everything. Isabel stepped out to give her privacy. Daniel was standing in the hallway watching. She didn't say, "Thank you," Isabel murmured. Not disappointed, just noticing. "She doesn't have to," he replied. She came. That was her way of saying yes. Later that night, back at Daniel's house, the 3 of them sat on the floor building a puzzle. Lily pointed to one corner piece. "Is this the edge?" she asked. "Yeah," Isabel said, smiling. "It's where things start to make sense." Lily yawned mid-puzzle and curled up against Isabel's side. Daniel glanced at the clock. "She's out cold. I'll carry her up." He watched Isabel gently lift Lily into her arms, her movement instinctive, graceful. As she climbed the stairs, Daniel remained on the floor, staring at the incomplete puzzle. One piece rested near his knee. When Isabel returned, he picked it up and handed it to her. "Last piece," he said. She placed it in the center. They both stared at it for a moment. Then she said quietly, "I never wanted to be rescued." "I know. But I wanted someone who wouldn't walk away." "I didn't." She turned to him. "And I won't," she added. Daniel leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. The moment pulsed between them, quiet and full. No rush, no fireworks, just something solid, something chosen. A week later, Isabel received a letter. It was hand-delivered. The seal was familiar. She opened it slowly, expecting some last-ditch plea from the company or worse, legal maneuvering. But it wasn't from Andrew. It was from a woman named Teresa, a former janitor at LaRue Holdings. Someone Isabel had only vaguely remembered. Ms. LaRue. "I don't know if you remember me. You probably don't. I was the one cleaning the conference floor every night after the board left. I saw you stay late. I saw you cry once in the hallway. I wanted to tell you then, but I didn't know how. You don't have to save the world all at once. You just have to light one room at a time. You lit mine even when you didn't know it. Thank you." Isabel folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. She didn't cry. She just breathed in deeply, quietly. And in that breath was everything she had once feared she'd lost her name. her purpose, her place. That evening, someone knocked at the door again. This time it was Lily. She had a new drawing. 3 people again, holding hands, but this time under a house with lights in every window. Above it, in bright purple marker, "Sometimes you knock on a door and someone knocks back." Isabel looked at Daniel, and he whispered, smiling, "Welcome home." The town was quiet that night, hushed by early spring rain and the kind of dusk that made everything porch steps, garden beds. Familiar faces looked softer, almost holy. The air smelled like fresh soil and lavender soap. Inside Daniel's house, laughter drifted from the kitchen low and rich like a song remembered. Isabel wiped her hands on a towel, having just pulled the last tray of muffins from the oven. She wasn't dressed like a woman who used to dominate boardrooms. She wore jeans fraying at the edges and a sweater Daniel insisted was his, though it now lived permanently draped over her shoulders. Her hair was half pulled up her cheeks, flushed with heat and happiness. Daniel stood beside her, filling mugs with tea. And Lily, who had been supervising the baking process, lay on the floor surrounded by markers and sticky notes carefully labeling each muffin as approved by Lily the expert. They had fallen into this rhythm quietly. No big declarations. No carefully constructed timelines. Just one choice after another, simple, clear, true. Home didn't come all at once, but it had come. After dinner they walked together to the North Lighthouse. The rain had eased to a mist and the path glistened under street lamps like a thread guiding them forward. The house stood proudly now, not just because it was structurally sound, but because it breathed. Kids' bicycles leaned against the porch. Curtains fluttered in lit windows. Someone inside was playing an old guitar. A baby's cry rang out from an open window, followed by soft coos and the quiet lull of someone singing. Isabel and Daniel stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, Lily swinging between their clasped hands. "This is the 5th family now," Isabel said, "and we have 3 more applications on the way." Daniel nodded. "They're calling you the porch light builder." She smiled. "I kind of like that. It fits." They stood in the glow for a moment longer. Then Lily tugged their hands. "Can we go inside?" Isabel kneeled beside her. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Tonight is their night." Lily pouted. "But I helped paint the bookshelf." Daniel leaned down. "And we'll come by tomorrow so you can see your masterpiece. Right now they're building their first memory here. They need to make it their own." Lily nodded solemnly. "Okay. Memories need space to breathe." Isabel looked at Daniel, eyebrows raised. "Where does she get this wisdom?" He grinned. "Cartoons. And maybe Marjorie." Back at home, Lily went to bed early, worn out from a day of CEO-level planning, as she called it. Daniel turned off the lights one by one, and Isabel settled onto the couch, cradling a mug of cocoa. A soft knock came at the door. When Daniel opened it, Marjorie stood there holding a small framed photograph. "I found this in an old folder from the shelter days," she said, handing it over. "Thought you two should have it." Isabel took the frame. Inside was a photo, grainy and imperfect, taken from a community center wall years ago. A much younger Daniel standing beside a heater he'd just installed. A paper sign taped to the wall behind him read, "Heat for the ones still healing." Below it, someone had scribbled, "Don't forget the power of warmth, literal and otherwise." Daniel's throat worked as he stared at it. Isabel brushed her fingers along the glass. "Thank you," she said softly. Marjorie smiled, eyes shining. "You two are the real thing. Not the fancy kind, not the flashy kind. The kind people actually remember." Later that night, with rain pattering gently on the roof, Daniel found Isabel curled on the porch swing, wrapped in his sweater, staring at the old light overhead. It still flickered slightly, stubborn as ever. "You never did replace it," she said as he sat beside her. He shrugged. "It works, even when it wobbles." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to think love had to be grand to be real," she murmured. Lavish proposals, dramatic moments, fireworks. And now she turned her face up to his. Now, I think it's this. A kid asleep upstairs. A light that flickers but doesn't go out. A man who makes room beside him even after all the doors I've closed. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. It's real. All of it. She pulled a small slip of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. He unfolded it. It was Lily's latest drawing, slightly better proportioned stick figures this time, under a banner that read, "This is what forever looks like." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just reached for her hand and held it as the porch light hummed above them. In the quiet that followed, Isabel closed her eyes and breathed it in. Not the past, not the pressure, not the name she had once thought defined her. But this moment, the warm, steady heartbeat of a life chosen deliberately. She had knocked on a